Evo sada ćemo vidjeti šta Scott Ritter misli o ruskoj vojsci.
We do not have a military today that can fight a large-scale ground war in Europe. I'll say it one more time because this is important. We do not have a military today that can fight a large-scale ground war in Europe. And yet, what is the president positioning us to do? Fight a large-scale ground war in Europe. Ladies and gentlemen, if we fight the Russians, we will lose. We will lose hands down. It won't even be close. NATO doesn't exist anymore. Oh, it's there as an organization. When I was in, the British had the British Army on the Rhine. 80,000 guys, highly trained. Today they barely have 80,000 guys in their entire military. Ask the Brits to put together a brigade and send it off their island into Europe. They can't do it. They can't do it. Ask the French. They can't do it. Ask the Germans. They can't do it. No one can do it. This is why Joseph Borrell, who is the head of foreign policy for the European Union, is freaking out right now because he recognizes the trajectory that Europe's on, which implies the potential for combat with Russia, and he says Europe cannot beat Russia in a war. That's an absolute statement of fact. People talk about the Russian military today, and if you read our newspapers, you listen to the news, you're thinking these guys are just a bunch of local yokel bumblings. They can't fight. They can't do anything right. Heck, they got beat north of Kiev. The ghost of Kiev shot down all their airplanes. Those 13 brave Marines gave them the finger and told them to stick it in their ear. No, guys. The Russians are some of the finest, most professional troops in the world. Why? Because in the 20 years that we were squandering our resources, hunting down goat herders and insurgents in Iraq and Afghanistan, they were focused on fighting us. Not because they want to fight us, but because we were promulgating policies that were pushing them into a corner where they had no choice to fight us. In 2008, Russia fought a short 5-day war with Georgia. It was a Russian victory, but it was a close-run thing because the Georgians had been trained for a number of years by U.S. Marines, and their small unit tactics were outstanding. And the Russians went in there, and they were getting waxed at the small unit level. The Georgians were shooting, moving, communicating, outmaneuvering, outflanking, moving. And the Russians were like, what the heck's going on here? We're slow and lumbering. They had to bring in their artillery, their armor, and just grind it through. And they beat them. But they realized we got a problem here because that's a small army trained to NATO standards. If we went up against a big army trained to NATO standards, we get waxed. So they changed the whole way they did business. And we saw that from 2008 to 2014. Remember 2014, Crimea, little green men? Well, the little green men were the new face of the Russian army, professional, not conscripts, contract soldiers. We call them volunteers in America. They call them contractors, a little bit more honest. It's about money. How am I going to make some money? Join the military, become a professional. 70% of the Russian military today is composed of contract soldiers. They're very, very good at what they do. It's not just at the small unit level. In 2016, again, because of our policies, what did Russia do? They brought back Cold War era units, the 1st Guards Tank Army, the 20th Combined Arms Army. These were units that used to exist during the Cold War whose sole purpose was to punch through NATO lines, get into NATO rear areas, and annihilate everything. Large-scale ground combat. And the Russians brought these units back, breathed new life into them, gave them new equipment. They're there. The Russians today are organized to fight large-scale ground combat in Europe. And when I say organized to fight, that means organized to win. How do we know this? Well, we see it right now, ladies and gentlemen. You can talk about the Ukrainians all you want. I'll tell you this. Not only were they one of the largest militaries in Europe, they were one of the best equipped militaries in Europe, one of the best trained militaries in Europe, one of the most competent militaries in Europe. This is the Ukrainian army I'm talking about. The Ukrainian army was capable of defeating, hands down, any army in NATO besides the United States. Maybe the Turks. But everybody else, Ukrainians would wax them. They're that good. And yet Russia is crushing them. Crushing them. That doesn't mean that Russia's not taking losses. Man, when you step into the ring with a heavyweight fighter, he's going to hit you. He's going to hit you hard, and if you're not careful, he's going to knock you out. And the Ukrainians are fully capable of delivering some heavy blows, and they have. The Russians aren't perfect. They have made mistakes, and they have paid a price. But the sign of a professional organization is your ability to adapt and overcome. And the Russians have adapted, and they've overcome. Today, we have people saying the Russian army officers aren't that good, their army's not that good. The battalion commanders that the Russians have on the ground in Ukraine today are the finest battalion commanders the world has ever seen. These guys are doing miracles. America's battalion commanders would do well to study what these guys are doing. How you lead from the front, sustain combat operations for 100 days, and you get better, not worse. That's a sign of a professional. The Russians are winning, hands down, and they are going to win, hands down. There's nothing that can happen to stop this. Nothing. But there's a problem. We can make the cost for Russia very high. We make it so high that it actually becomes painful. And if we make it too high, then we have what we call a game-changing moment. And we're on the verge of reaching that. We're providing the Ukrainians with weapons that are not going to change the outcome of the war. They are not. HIMARS is not going to change the outcome of the war. The M777A2 with its Excalibur round is not going to change the outcome of the war. Even if they get the Harpoon anti-shipping missile, it's not going to change the outcome of the war. But what it will do is kill Russians. And it will kill Russians in large numbers. And this will make it more difficult for Russia to win its victory in a reasonable time frame. It'll drag this conflict out. Now, Russia will win, but the price that will be paid by Russia will be very high, and the price paid by Ukraine will be even higher. And for all the people that say we have the little Ukrainian flag on our thing, we've identified ourselves, go to hell. Because if you care about the Ukrainian people, if you give a damn about humanity, then you'd want this war to be over today. Because all that's going to happen between now and the inevitable termination of this conflict is tens of thousands of Ukrainians are going to die. Ukrainian infrastructure will be destroyed. But that's not even the worst that can happen. The worst that can happen is when Russia decides that America has gone too far. You see, this is not a war that's being fought in Ukraine. It's a special military operation. You should probably look into what that means. It means that Russia's carrying out pretty much a punitive police action to punish Ukraine for 8 years of violence inflicted on the Russian population of the Donbass. This was not a war of conquest. This was not a war of domination. Yes, they did some things in Kiev to shape the battlefield, but the primary objective is to close with and destroy 60 to 100,000 Ukrainian troops that were threatening Donbass. And the Russians are achieving that as we speak. But the price that they're paying is very high. And we're treating it as if it's a war. We have a defense secretary who has said that the purpose of the United States is basically to bleed Russia dry, to achieve a strategic victory by making the Russians pay such a heavy price that they are no longer able to threaten Europe. Well, if you're a Russian listening to that, what are you thinking? Okay, no. Guys, let me just remind you of the name, Qasem Soleimani. You remember that name? Qasem Soleimani was the Iranian general who provided weapons and training and assistance to Iraqi insurgents while we were occupying their country, and he is credited with killing 500 to 600 American soldiers as part of this. And we hate him so much that we assassinated him. We held a grudge and we killed him. Well, you know what? We are Qasem Soleimani now. We are doing what Qasem Soleimani did to us, but this time we're doing it to the Russians, and they're paying an even heavier price. We are creating bitterness, anger, resentment in Russia. And at some point, they're going to cross the line, and they're going to fire missiles outside of Ukraine into American targets, into NATO targets, and now we're talking a real war, one that we won't win. Joe Biden, you're writing checks the American body can't cash.
Hajde da pogledamo šta Scott Ritter misli o blokadi Kaliningrada.
What's happening right now? It's some very serious stuff. Lithuania, a NATO member, has instituted a blockade against Kaliningrad, Russia. Kaliningrad isn't some sort of toy. I get this feeling that the Baltics and the Poles and everybody's like, Kaliningrad's just a little toy. We play with Kaliningrad because it's not really Russia. No, Pro hint, it's really Russia. And if you blockade it, you're going to war against Russia, and Russia's going to blow you off the face of the earth. Because this isn't Ukraine. This isn't a special military operation. This is Russia. You're blockading Russia? Are you high? And now Europe's woken up saying, whoa, Lithuania, you may not want to do this. But the Lithuanians are like a little pathetic Pomeranian who thinks they can fight a Rottweiler. You're going to get taught a lesson, Lithuania, unless you reverse course. It's a serious lesson. And NATO's also waking up to the fact that they ain't got nothing to fight Russia. I already said, 10 days, all their artillery is gone, ammunition. And then the Russians just roll.
Čuli smo šta priča Scott Ritter. Da li je ovo neobično za jednog Amerikanca, izlaganje?
Da li je neobično? Pa nije neobično za Amerikanca. Scott Ritter je zaista vjerovatno broj jedan analitičar na zapadnoj hemisferi. Ali šta on priča? On priča ono što je rekao i Sergej Lavrov. Ta američka zver, američka hegemonija je na umoru. I tu zver sada, Rusi su lepo to konstatovali. To je zaista Lavrov odlično definisao. Sada su na umoru i treba ih otpratiti tamo gde idu da počivaju. U ovom trenutku, kažem, Rusija vodi tu jednu, ajde kažem, operaciju da ne provociraju previše. Dakle, kao što vidite iz njihovih i ovoga što se događa na frontu, vi ne možete vidjeti ni na ovim prilozima, ni nigde da se prikazuju ratni zarobljenici, da se prikazuju neka velika razaranja, odnosno, oni imaju 1000 ratnih zarobljenika. Rusi imaju 1000, znači ne prikazuju, ne sramote ljude. Kada se govori o tom, o upotrebi sile, kao što vidite, ta upotreba sile, to sam već rekao, Kodaškov kada govori, on govori šta su tačno gađali. Dakle, američka imperijalna zver je na umoru, Rusije ne provociraju, pustit će na miru da iskrvari i ruska vojna mašina ne pokazuje znake zamora, što je ovako prilično pohvalno za rusku vojsku. Oni su očigledno uveštili ratovanjem od 2017. godine. Dakle, izvršavaju svoje borbene zadatke, napreduju očigledno po svojim planovima, ne žure previše. Dakle, ovo je 5,5 mjeseci već traje. Napravimo analogiju, Amerikanci imaju 1 milion vojnika koji su imali tada, bilo je potrebno 6 mjeseci. Na 2003. godine poraze iračku armiju, nastavili su da ratuju do 2009. godine. S tim što je taj rat bio daleko krvaviji i odno je oko 1,5 iračkih žrtava od 2003. do 2009. godine. Rusi, kao što vidimo, ratuju sa 4 puta manje vojnika nego što ih ima druga strana. I ovo je jedan presedan. Kada gledamo istoriju ratovanja, uvijek je strani koja napada trebalo obrnuta proporcija u napadu.